some people argue that Mark Twain was perhaps racist, when others strongly believe that he was not. In fact, he did use the N-word multiple times in this novel to refer to Jim, who was an African-American man enslaved by a white American woman, Miss Watson. However, if we take a close look at the message he intended to spread, we might be surprised to see that he was actually against slavery. Which leads to the question, does anti-slavery possibly mean not racist? But this question is going to be for another video. Today we're going to focus on the core message in Huckleberry Finn and see the meaning of the important elements in this book. Hi, bonjour, bon dia, hola, and guten tag. Welcome to TBM. This is Targeting Books and Movies, a place where we discuss literature in a simple way. Today's targeted book is going to be Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. This is part 2, by the way, and for those who didn't watch the first part, click on the video above to watch the summary and remember the story. Without further ado, let's get started. In this novel, Huck is being offered only 3 ways of preceding civilization. One includes religion, education and clothes, good manners, and racism. The other includes alcoholism, violence, poverty, bad parenting, and racism. And the last one includes freedom, kindness, compassion, and the absence of civilization. One is being represented by the widowed Douglas, Miss Watson, Tom's aunt, and school education, while the other is being represented by Pops, Huck's father, and the con man. And the third way of living is being represented by Jim. When Huckleberry Finn finds himself with Jim in the island they were hiding, it's important to know that Huck had been told that it was a sin to help a slave escape, and he believed that he was going to hell for even wanting to help Jim, which was an evil thing to do in the eyes of the Lord according to white American society. His duty as a white boy was to bring Jim back into slavery to Miss Watson, his owner. However, Huck saw humanity in Jim and considered him as a friend. Therefore, he got very confused whether he should denounce him or help him find his freedom. That's when a battle started in his mind, a battle between his conscience and his ethical conscience. Now mind you, in this novel, Twain paints 19th century America as a place where white Americans and African Americans didn't really mix with each other. In fact, it was badly perceived in society, but mainly because white Americans didn't consider African American people as equally human as them, and white American Christians and slave owners actually used a biblical verse to justify slavery and their hatred towards African Americans. So Genesis 9:18-27. Basically, what happened there was that Ham, one of Noah's sons and the father of Canaan, saw Noah's nudity when Noah was drunk and told his brother about it. Ham's brothers went backwards holding a coat to cover their father. On the next day, when Noah woke up, his sons told him about it, and Noah's reaction was the following. I quote, he said, "Cursed be Canaan, the lowest of slaves will he be to his brothers." So slave owners convinced themselves that African Americans were the descendants of Ham, and therefore it was legitimate to have them as slaves since Noah sentenced them into slavery decades ago in the Holy Bible. Well, which sounds like a very bad interpretation of this chapter. But that's why Huck is going through such a difficult and painful fight against the morals he had been taught since his childhood. Indeed, Huck literally believed that he was fighting against God, but still he chose to follow his own way that appeared to him as the better way. Twain wanted to point out the nonsense of racism and the hypocrisy of American society. He also intended to confuse the readers by creating a white American character who refuses intellectual and moral education and who follows his own mind and chooses his own truth. Twain was eager to show how society did not understand true Christianity and how hypocritical the situation was. Ironically, Huckleberry Finn may be the one who's going to heaven and not to hell as society believed. He accomplished good work by trying to help Jim find his freedom. He showed compassion, consideration, tolerance, innocence, and most importantly, he learned to think and make his own decisions and followed his own path. But I believe that Mark Twain perhaps aimed at showing us that Huck was not only listening to his own mind, but that he was actually being able to listen to God's voice. Here, Twain demonstrated that society was actually behaving more like the devil than like Jesus, whereas Huck was behaving more like Christians are told to behave in the Bible by showing compassion, consideration, respect, protection, and love to the oppressed. In the eyes of society, Huckleberry Finn represented nothing enviable or pleasant because of his social status and lack of education. But what's contradictory here is that the Bible doesn't say the same. On the contrary, it encourages poor people a lot, and it even says that Jesus came down from heaven to earth for the poor and the weary to give them rest and peace. And Jesus himself said in the Bible that the kingdom of heaven belongs to the poor. Now, Twain perhaps aimed at making people reflect on what it truly meant to be a good citizen and Christian according to the Bible by showing them how ridiculous and unchristian the practice of slavery was. Know also that at that time, religion was a huge thing in the USA, and America considered itself as the chosen nation by God to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ along the barriers. Twain may have wanted to point out that white Americans were acting against biblical scriptures and were probably heading towards hell. Twain used irony throughout this novel. According to Cambridge Dictionary, a literary definition of irony would be that it's a style of writing in which there is a noticeable, often humorous difference between what is said and the intended meaning. Another definition would be that it happens in situations in which something which was intended to have a particular result has the opposite or a very different result. For instance, Huckleberry Finn embodies what they called white trash in 19th century America, yet Twain paints a picture in which a poor, white, uneducated orphan has a purer heart than those who presented themselves as good Christians and good American citizens. Huck is also the one who is showing higher intelligence because of his way of perceiving Jim and slavery, and he even gets a better understanding of what it means to be human. Nevertheless, Huck faces big confusion and fear in his mind. Indeed, it had become a battlefield in which his own conscience and thoughts fought against his religious and social education. In fact, it seems as if God's voice was reaching him and leading him towards the right decisions. Now, let's have a look at two important elements in this book which we have not discussed yet. The Mississippi River. It represents security, beauty, and it's also a refuge for Huck and Jim, and it represents peace, freedom, acceptance, tranquility, and offers them a sense of serenity. For Huck and Jim, the Mississippi River and the island were places where they could escape land life that was full of violence and segregation, racism, rules, and hypocrisy. Nature represents beauty and is perceived as a refuge against abuse in civilization. It offered peace, a sense of freedom, tranquility, and serenity. It was a place where they felt accepted just as they were. It seems as though nature has almost been given a divine importance here, with the power of enhancing good reflection and giving the ability of perceiving the world as it should have been. The other element is the raft, which is also a metaphor that represents comfort, freedom, peace, home, but also danger. What seems uncomfortable to many is actually comfortable for them when it comes to lifestyle. As for instance, sleeping on a raft or under the stars isn't what society considers as being an ideal way of living. However, Huck and Jim found the freedom and the peace they were looking for and they needed. Living on a raft and traveling with it also got them into dangerous adventures and meetings. In fact, there they met the two con men, but also the two robbers and killers, and finally, they almost got hit by a steamboat. Now, the ending of the story appears to be quite sad and disappointing to many readers, because after Huck and Jim bonded such a pure and beautiful friendship, readers expected the story to end differently. Indeed, they hoped for a more positive ending in which Huck and Jim would finally be happy and find their place in society. But Twain chose to narrate an ending that was the reflection of the former situation in 19th century America. After the Civil War and during the Reconstruction era, African Americans had been promised citizenship and freedom, and the African American community hoped that they were finally seeing the end of the tunnel, only to witness later on that white Americans had found other ways of maintaining slavery without calling it slavery, and they used political power to oppress them as much as they could. Twain may have decided to highlight the hypocrisy of white Americans through satire and irony while showing their act of cruelty towards African Americans. I believe his intent was also to make people realize how disappointing that situation was for the evolution of American society, who at that time was proclaiming to be God's chosen people. As a conclusion, Mark Twain used a child as the main character who represented everything America despised to teach American people wisdom. Indeed, Huckleberry Finn didn't have a good school education, didn't fit well in nice clothes, didn't see the point in his people's religion, nor in school education or table manners. He was interested in life and freedom and desired more than anything to live life as he intended. But he surely believed in God and hell, and he was a good-hearted person. Which brings us to reflect on the fact that the character of Huckleberry Finn might give us an idea of how autochthones and African American slaves may have felt when white Americans were trying to push their culture into them and make them more white by trying to make them dress up like them, eat like them, talk like them, practically live like them, which was what white Americans called the process of civilization.